Hate number 5, search difficulty. It would seem that this is the road to automotive happiness. Buy a premium car, powerful and fast, for half the price of a compact Chinese crossover. But many reviews in recent years contain a description of a long and difficult search for a suitable option. We examined more than 30 cars and realized, unkilled cars, no more than 2 owners, no accidents, original title, in Moscow at a price of up to 1 million are just no. I looked through about 100 advertisements. I didn't bother with the configuration. I looked at the average price segment in terms of price. I looked in person at 5 cars that were just put up for sale. All of them, frankly, require large investments. I was looking for a living one for a very long time. This is where the dog rummaged. Prius-styling Audi Q5s have a number of vulnerabilities that will definitely require serious intervention at certain mileages. Of course, one can hope that the previous owner has already resolved the most egregious situations, with oil leaks, stretching of the timing chain and robotic gearbox. But even if the car you have your eye on has an absolutely transparent repair history, and you definitely see that the previous owner has already changed the chain, piston and rebuilt the box, this still does not mean anything. It is very likely that he already felt the need to repeat all these expensive operations, and other systems began to remind of their existence, so he decided to shift all these costs onto the shoulders of the next owner. Many reviews recommend buying diesel versions, or cars manufactured after 2012. They have a reinforced piston, they do not suffer from catastrophically high oil consumption, and the chain on third-generation engines is equipped with an improved tensioner, and ZF hydromechanics are installed instead of a robot. It's like that. But these machines are already significantly more expensive, despite the fact that they may also require investments. In addition, everyone says in unison that you need to look for the richest configurations. They make you feel all the premiumness of the cuckoo. But at one time, when our 8th-generation cars were still sold in showrooms, buyers simply went berserk at the cost of additional options. A rear-view camera, heated rear seats, a heated steering wheel and many other very useful little things that have long been included in the basic package had to be ordered and paid separately, resulting in a very non-acidic price tag. Well, by putting up such a car for sale, the owner quite reasonably wants to at least partially return his costs. There is only one conclusion from all this: it is very difficult to purchase a live and successful copy of the Audi Q5. It is categorically not recommended to buy this car for the last money, and most likely after the purchase you will have to invest $150,000 to $200,000 in the car in a short time. Love number 5, Audi is status. And yet Audi is not just a brand, it is history, engineering, sports history and status. And the status of the brand also affects the status of the owner. It is not surprising that often the drive belt when buying is the opinion of the wife. I bought it, seduced by the image of the Audi, and my wife got it and ate all the baldness. And the Q5 truly gives owners a taste of the upper echelon of the automotive world. An Audi is an Audi. Premium is felt in everything: interior, comfort, control, everything feels premium. After it, I get into my wife's almost new Kia Ceed and immediately feel a huge difference in class. But how can there be no but? If you want to live beautifully, pay. Hate number 4, cost of maintenance and repairs. I must say that the authors of the reviews disagree on the cost of maintaining the Audi Q5. Some believe that everything is quite normal and feasible, maybe a little more expensive than in the case of mass brands, but that's why it's premium. Others do not write anything in the reviews themselves, but note the cost of maintenance in the list of shortcomings. Still others are frankly indignant. The cost of service is unreasonably high. For 5 years of ownership, I invested the second cost of the car in maintenance. I agree that the car is simply beautiful, but only on the condition that someone will pay for its operation, and the owner will only drive. The cost of maintenance is also called different. Some write that the price of maintenance is from $9,000 to $18,000, others, which is no more than $12,000 to $13,000, others, from $20,000 to $35,000, or even more. 2-4 cost me 38,000 rubles. It is worth listening to the recommendations to at least have the service interval compared to the recommended one, that is, from 15 to 7.5 thousand kilometers. It is clear that this will seriously increase annual expenses, although it will save you from such expensive repairs as replacing the mechatronics of the box and the piston group of the motor. The situation with ongoing repairs is even more serious, because everything made by man tends to break. But, as the owners noted, back in 2021, prices for spare parts from the Volkswagen concern increased by approximately 1.5 to 2 times. At the same time, many owners write that the Q5 is very reluctant to accept non-original spare parts, especially those of Chinese and Malaysian origin. In principle, you can look towards non-originals produced in the EU, but they are not that cheap either. Body repairs are very expensive. For example, the authors of reviews write that the original aluminum trunk lid, primed, without glass and plastic, costs at least 95,000 rubles, and the wing costs like a wing, but from Boeing. In many reviews, owners note that the only way to solve this issue on a relatively budgetary basis is to find the required part at a disassembly. In general, it's better not to get into an accident with a Q5. According to the owners, if you are considering buying an Audi Q5 with a mileage of about 150,000 kilometers and at the same time expect to drive another 100,000, then you need to be mentally and financially prepared for serious investments, replacing the timing chain 2 times, replacing the fuel filter 1 times, changing the oil in the gearbox 1 to 2 times, replacing the radiator 1 time, replacing the pump 1 time, replacing the upper arms 1 time, replacing the wheel bearing 1 time, replacing different pipes of the cooling system 1 time. And, unfortunately, it is possible to capitalize the engine 1 time and replace the stove engine 1 time. Of course, this is, so to speak, the most negative forecast, and in the case of buying a pre-styling car. But even if you decide to fork out and buy a 2013 to 2015 car, you should follow a few simple rules. Firstly, it is imperative to check the timing chain tension. There is a special plug in front of the engine for this. When the tensioner reaches 6 divisions, urgently change the chain. It is imperative to change the oil in ZF hydromechanics, and along with the filter. It is worth paying special attention to the condition of the thermostat housing with a pump and the antifreeze tank. Their resource is about 50 to 60,000 kilometers. If cracks appear, change ruthlessly. Not everyone knows that this car has a fuel filter that needs to be changed every 60,000 kilometers. It is located directly in the fuel tank. In general, it is worth putting aside about 100,000 right away, and be prepared to fork out in the future. As one of the owners wrote in his review, if you earn less than 100 to 150,000 per month, look for something simpler. Last year, only for repairs and consumables, it took me about 200,000. Without serious breakdowns and accidents and not taking into account tax and insurance, plus about 150,000 for gasoline. Love number 4, ageless design and perfect size. In fact, I did not come across reviews in which the authors would write that they bought the Audi Q5 simply because they fell in love with the appearance of this car at first sight. At the same time, the owners rate the design itself very highly: strict, classic, concise, but most importantly ageless. It is no coincidence that the appearance of the car did not change from 2009 to 2017, and the second generation Q5 was made very similar to the first. The design of the car remains relevant to this day. Even now, the Q5 in this body looks modern. I like the design of the Q5 the most, especially the taillights. In the dark, they look very beautiful, they write in their reviews, and, perhaps, we can agree with them. And best of all, according to many, the car looks in the body kit S-line, on 20-inch wheels. But it is not only the finely drawn lines of the exceptionally harmonious bodywork created by Christian Winkelmann that are important. Many reviewers note that the Q5 has the optimal size, and size, as you know, matters. Cuckoo, the car is large enough, but not big. You can get used to its dimensions in almost one day. In addition, the car is compact enough to easily maneuver in the hustle and bustle of the city, and its owner would not have much trouble finding parking spaces. Not a barge like the Q7, and not a Golf on steroids like the Q3, but if you put the box on the roof, then 4 of us with ski and snowboard equipment, and a bunch of other junk, can comfortably go on a gurney to Sochi. Hate number 3, weak paintwork, visibility problems, noise and glass roof. Even the most reliable cars have flaws. They may not be serious, but they can cause serious annoyance to owners. What can we say about the Audi Q5, the first generation of which showed a whole bunch of childhood diseases caused by design miscalculations? But we will talk about these serious problems a little later, but for now about unpleasant little things. Let's start with the fact that in so many reviews, the authors note a weak paintwork. Chips appear even from the smallest stones, dirt, twigs, tall, tough grass. All this instantly scratches. The front bumper is heavily sandblasted. In a good way, it requires painting after 4 years, and the bottom of the doors, chips on the paint throughout the car. The owners are especially upset by the flying paint of the black glossy area under the license plate on the front bumper. It changes along with a false radiator grille, the one on which the Audi rings, and this part costs at least 40,000 rubles. Another source of disappointment is the glass roof, naturally, if it was included in the package. Firstly, it may start to leak. Secondly, its opening section begins to creak and jam over time. In winter, the glass roof constantly creaks. This year this creaking remained in the summer. There were even cases when the glass in the roof simply crumbled in frosty weather. Door handles also don't like dust and dirt, especially on the left side. They stick in the open position and don't want to come back. Some people are able to restore the functionality of the mechanism using WD-40 and silicone lubricant, while others have to look for a replacement. In general, owners are satisfied with the visibility of the Q5, except for the forward left view. It is limited by wide A-pillars. It was especially unpleasant for the first time when a person at a pedestrian crossing suddenly found himself next to the car when I was turning left. Well, acoustic comfort in the cabin. Here the owner's assessments differ diametrically. Someone writes that the sound insulation is not just bad, but very bad. Someone thinks that it's nothing, but it doesn't quite correspond to the status of the car, and someone claims that it's just excellent. Noise isolation is beyond praise. It is especially felt when you lower the glass. Nevertheless, many mention that they dealt with this issue additionally: noise insulation of doors, sound insulation of the trunk lid. Without this it was somehow loud. Love number 3, cabin comfort and ride comfort. In almost all reviews, the authors note the highest comfort and the very high quality of both finishing materials and fitting of internal panels. Even the owners of not the youngest cars are happy to note the complete absence of squeaks and crickets. The skin is dense, hardy, and looks great even after a dozen years, if it was looked after. The range of adjustments allows you to choose the position of the driver's seat without regard to build. The front row seats themselves are comfortable, hard and German, but allow you to spend many hours in them without signs of fatigue. Questions are raised only by a fairly vertical landing, but this applies only to those drivers who are used to driving reclining. There are, of course, some complaints, and many of them relate to head units. For example, the owners call the Audi sound system with a bunch of buttons and a monochrome display completely outdated, and if the car has a more feature-rich MMI system, then it lacks a joystick with which the same systems and sedans of this brand are controlled. In addition, owners are annoyed that music from the phone can only be played through the AUX wire, although the phone itself, for hands-free conversations, can also be connected via Bluetooth. It is no coincidence that there are a lot of lively discussions on the internet about replacing standard head units with Android heads from China, because with such a replacement it becomes possible to install normal navigation with traffic jams and play music from different sources. The estimates of the interior space are also ambiguous. Someone writes that, with a height of 185 centimeters, he barely sat down behind himself. It was crowded, and it was crowded behind the wheel, that there was really little space in the cabin, especially in the back, and the children were uncomfortable there. For some, the lack of space in the Q5 cabin has become the main reason for the sale. Someone thinks that everything is fine, 5 of us are not very convenient, but 4 adults can ride quite comfortably. The owners evaluate the trunk quite positively: 3 suitcases, a portable refrigerator, 2 children's scooters, 4 chairs and a table, folding, a tent, an air mattress, tiles, dishes with a bowler hat, a pump and 2 backpacks fit in. 5 of us went to Sheremetyevo, me, my wife and 3 children, 3, 7 and 15 years old. 2 suitcases fit into the trunk, the largest of the Samsonite, 2 medium and 1 small, plus a stroller. There are only minor complaints about the lack of containers for small things and the inability to completely fold the front seat, so it's better to carry long lengths like skis on the roof, since there are roof rails. Finally, such an important parameter as driving comfort. Here, too, there is no complete unity. There are even absolutely critical assessments. A wooden cart, on every bump larger than 5 mm you jump up to the ceiling. The suspension is perhaps the most uncomfortable of all that I had to move around. When moving speed bumps, the whole car bounces noisily. But here the critics still remain in a clear minority. Most people think that the Q5 suspension is neither stiff nor soft. It is dense enough to provide excellent handling, but at the same time allows you to cover long distances without any problems and fatigue. This is the first car in which I drove 1,000 kilometers non-stop and could still continue. On the road, I got high. The suspension is quite energy-intensive and soft, and the air suspension on newer bodies is just fine. According to the owners, even on 20-inch wheels, you can move very comfortably, although installing more high-profile rubber improves the ride. Yes, the car really does not like small holes, but at the same time it crosses the cops without any problems at all and strong vertical accelerations transmitted to the spine. In general, on good tracks, the Q5 provides a lot of positive emotions, especially for happy owners of trim levels with an opening glass roof. In the summer I love to open the roof of the Q5, look at the blue sky with white clouds, at the green foliage, a complete feeling of a convertible, only without a draft and dust in face. Hate number 2. Oh, that robot. At the beginning of the 2000s, the appearance of pre-selective robotic boxes had the effect of a bomb exploding. The designers were full of enthusiasm. After all, robots made it possible to maintain the convenience of traditional hydraulic automatic transmissions with the efficiency and dynamics of mechanical transmissions. So Audi, when creating the Q5 crossover, relied on a box with a wet clutch DSG7DL501, adapted for a longitudinal engine arrangement and received its own brand name S-tronic. This box became the main one for both the mass-produced 2-liter turbo engine with a power of 211 horsepower and the 270 horsepower V-shaped 6. But complaints and requests for warranty repairs began to pour in almost immediately. For some buyers, the boxes began to go wrong almost a few days after the car left the showroom. Basically, 2 nodes suffered: the dual clutch itself, which did not nurse the warranty 150,000 kilometers and often needed to be replaced already at 30 to 50,000, and the mechatronics and electronic hydraulic unit, which is entrusted with the function of direct control gear shifting. If you dig into the reviews, then in the history of so many Q5s you can find the phrase box replacement under warranty. Naturally, buyers of the secondary market have already dropped out of the warranty field. Here are such lines from the owners, full of mental pain: the run has exceeded 90,000 kilometers, and then someone knocked from below. S-tronic, I thought and went for diagnostics. The verdict is the replacement of mechatronics, with all the pies, almost 300,000 rubles. Shock. Snot. Nerves. Or here's a story. I bought a car in February, and in May it got warm, and the box began to pull from the heat. The first time she jerked, I thought that someone had crashed into me, and the second time she pulled so hard that my wife was crying at the wheel. But the Q5 is a dynamic car, and they buy it in order to use this very dynamics, so the recommendations are to change the driving style, do not start abruptly from traffic lights, switch to manual gear shifting in traffic jams, so that the box does not constantly jump from first to second and back, are perceived by the owners with irritation and bewilderment. Why did I buy Audi? So that I could ride like a retired grandfather? It is clear that not all owners turned out to be completely unlucky and ran into a complete bulkhead, for which, by the way, you can give 200, and 300, and 450,000. There are also those who claim that the S-tronic is the best box on the planet, and it does not cause any problems, unless, of course, the oil change interval is reduced to 25 to 30,000 kilometers, the clutch block is changed every 80 to 90,000, and preferably in a decent service that will not rob you, but many do not believe in it. You will never be able to relax 100% and get the most out of control. You will constantly expect some kind of dirty trick from the robot. Although if there are free 200,000 rubles in the wallet, which is not a pity, then you should not worry. Love number 2, fuel consumption. I must say right away, none of the authors of the reviews, regardless of which engine is under the hood of their cuckoo, complains about excess appetite and does not record fuel consumption as a shortcoming of the model. Naturally, the main praises are heard from the friendly chorus of diesel drivers. The owners of the 170 horsepower 2.0 TDI are as happy as elephants. Fuel consumption on the highway is 6.5 to 7 L/100 km, in the city 9 to 10. Just a fairy tale, the real consumption in the city is 10 to 11 liters in winter, taking into account heating and warming up, well, 9 liters in summer. On the highway, 6 to 6.5 liters, at a speed of 100 to 110 kilometers per hour. The joy of the owners of 3-liter diesel engines, which record consumption on the highway of about 8, and in the city of 11 to 12 L/100 km, is even greater. The TDI 3.0 engine is probably the best of all that was invented in the world. The fuel consumption to power ratio is unique. As for the numerous owners of pre-styled Q5s with a 2-liter TFSI petrol with a capacity of 211 horses, they are not upset by either the average consumption, which, as a rule, does not exceed 11 to 12 L/100 kilometers, nor the consumption on the highway, 7 to 8 L/100 kilometers. The fuel reserve in the tank is usually enough for more than 700 kilometers. Sometimes there are complaints about too high consumption in conditions of dense city traffic, eating 15 liters in the city, but more often there are figures of the order of 10 to 11 L/100 kilometers. Naturally, the consumption in specific conditions is very dependent on the severity of the foot on the gas pedal. The 3.2-liter V6 naturally has a slightly higher appetite, but the owners of such cars, as a rule, do not touch this issue at all. They knew in advance what they were getting into. But quite heated discussions often flare up between the owners of restyled gasoline cars with 2-liter engines and hydromechanical automatic machines. Some write that consumption in the city, even in Moscow traffic jams, does not rise above 12 L/100 kilometers, and on the highway it's really possible to keep within 8, and 7, and even 6 liters per 100. How will you drive? Others argue furiously, consumption is 10 liters? I laugh in your face. 13 liters on the highway, that's if you push off with your foot. The average consumption is 15 to 17 liters, consumption is around 20 to 25 liters, so a very voracious car consumption, like on an empty truck. Nevertheless, a balanced estimate looks something like this. In the city, Moscow, ordinary traffic jams, about 12 liters. In the summer, when everyone goes on vacation and there are fewer traffic jams, the consumption is about 11 liters, but on Friday traffic jams it rises to 13 L/100 kilometers. On the highway at a speed of 80 to 90 kilometers/h, the consumption can drop below 9 liters, but before the first overtaking, if you drive 100 to 115, then it remains somewhere within 10 liters, from 120 and above, no more than 10.5 liters per 100. Hate number 1, fat eater, stretch chain and overall reliability. And Ferdinand Piëch decided to create turbo engines, light and powerful, and thought that it would be good. But in the beginning there was a word, and that word was Maslowser. This is how the gospel from Volkswagen could look like. Indeed, without mentioning the Maslowser, that is, excessive use of oil, almost no review of the Audi Q5 can do. In the worst case, a story follows about how the disease developed and what the treatment cost. At best, the author writes that he was lucky and he did not encounter this problem. In real life, the problem looks something like this. I just got sick of the unrealistic oil consumption. Once a week a liter was poured into the car, although there was no afterburner or racing. I went to the service station several times. They did a control measurement, but after 855 kilometers the engine said, "Give me oil, master." I went to the service center, another oil measurement and a complete engine overhaul. Indeed, the problem can be radically solved only by completely replacing the piston group, and this is not at all cheap. Owners are trying to save money on repairs in different ways. They decarbonize, change valve stem seals, but the problem does not completely go away. Most of all, the owners of pre-styling cars with Gen 2 gasoline engines were alarming that the masters in the services poked their noses into the documentation, proving that consumption up to 1 liter per 1,000 kilometers is considered normal. But you still have to deal with this issue. How do you like the bulkhead of a premium engine on a run of 11,000 because of an oil burner? And this is a fact. The worst car in my life. It all started with the fact that I poured oil in on a serpentine in Sochi for 100 kilometers. She ate a liter of oil. A liter for 100 kilometers, Carl. Against this background, the recommendation looks absolutely normal to pay attention to engines with compression ignition. If you already decide to take it, then please take only diesel, so you can at least sell it later, or fork out for restyling. There are global gasoline engines, there doesn't seem to be any problems with the oil burner. But the absence of a global problem does not mean that you are protected from the oil burner. Here the owner of the 225 horsepower Q5 of 2014 writes, "The most misfortune happened at a run of 105,000. For no reason at all, the car began to eat oil, like crazy. Approximate consumption is 1 liter per 1,000 kilometers. Inspection showed carbon deposits in the second cylinder and some problems in the fourth." But the troubles of TFSI are not limited to one oil burner. The timing mechanism with an unreliable chain delivers no less problems. It stretches like an elastic band from panties, the owners of pre-styling cars write angrily in the reviews. He overhauled the engine, the chain jumped, the valves bent, changed camshafts and crankshaft. It turned out that this was a childhood disease of this engine. In general, periodic inspections of the condition of the chain and tensioner are mandatory, since the operation to replace the chain itself until recently cost no more than 55,000 rubles, which, perhaps, is not so little, but many times cheaper than a major overhaul. Against the backdrop of problems with the engine, other faults that are quite common for the Q5 look like mere trifles. A leaking water pump, a cracking thermostat housing, front wheel bearings, the life of which in earlier versions did not even reach 30,000 kilometers, biting of the steering, treated by replacing the cross, although sometimes the entire steering shaft needs to be replaced, an electrician, which is a lot and which over time, it can, as they say in Odessa, begin to make a head. For example, I have repeatedly come across complaints about problems with the rear window wiper or seat adjustment servos. There can be many reasons, and it is not easy to identify them. For example, corrosion of wires due to the fact that moisture accumulates under the driver's seat. In principle, the list of malfunctions that the owner of the Kushka may encounter can be replenished for a very long time. As a result, the authors of reviews of pre-styling cars often include unreliability among the main drawbacks, and the reviews sound very sharp and categorical. "The worst car in my life. The car is complete bullshit. I regret the money thrown away. I will never buy again. After this experience, Audi is a closed topic for me. Never buy this car." Separate examples of rather trouble-free long-term operation and achievement of runs of 250 to 300,000 kilometers do not change the general mood. At best, the authors write when it doesn't break down, it seems to be even a good car. But with restyling, the attitude changes quite dramatically, and review authors begin to mention reliability in the list of advantages. "An excellent car, the best I've ever had. This is the best crossover I've ever had. One of the most trouble-free cars I've ever driven. Love number 1, handling and dynamics in all conditions." The first feeling is great. The car is a hurricane. When performing a maneuver, you don't have to think about "I'll have time, I won't have time." You have time and make it. Everything about her is wonderful: dynamics, charisma, character. "Oh, how she steers." Yes, almost all owners, with the exception of very rare critics who only confirm the general rule, consider the main advantages of the Audi Q5 to be dynamics and handling, regardless of what engine the car is equipped with. Owners note very high stability at high speeds and, at the same time, the ability to drive leisurely and impressively. This car allows you to calmly drive at a relaxed pace, and, if necessary, aggressively, but drive with comfort and confidence both in the city and at high speeds and track. Owners of diesel cars are especially enthusiastic. Indeed, it seems that diesel does not give reason to expect special agility from the car, but high torque speaks its weighty word. The dynamics of a car weighing 2 tons, a combination of 3.0 TDI 239 horsepower, and 500 Newton-meters with a robot is just a bomb. Tank traction from the very bottom, 6.5s to 100 km per hour, and it doesn't matter if you go uphill or not, you overtake the column without noticing. Excellent handling can be called another guarantee of safety, but what so what, and almost everyone praises the handling of the Q5, and certainly no one scolds, obedient, holds well during any turn. Even if you didn't manage to slow down in time, she listens sensitively to the steering wheel, as if she's waiting for my command. Very driver-friendly. And stability on the road, and dynamics, and handling are largely the merit of the Quattro all-wheel drive system. It is thanks to her that a certain road omnivorousness is ensured that the car steadily holds the trajectory both in summer and winter, and on asphalt, and on a grader. The owners are especially struck by the efficiency on how much coverage. It's not at all clear how she drives on an icy road, even if it's difficult to walk on it, it's so slippery. At the same time, the car retains some rear-wheel drive habits, allowing you to turn donuts or famously go through a roundabout. Well, if the capabilities of Quattro are still not enough, the stabilization system quietly and delicately comes into play. In addition, thanks to Quattro and quite serious, for crossovers, ground clearance of 200 mm, the Q5 feels confident in the snow and on snow-covered streets, and in uncleared parking lots, and even in fields after a snowfall. During a heavy snowfall that paralyzed not so long ago in the Tver region, I specially traveled through the snow. The car drives more than decently, the cross-country ability is excellent. I only got into the rapids once, but I left on my own in 20 minutes, plowing half the field. And all this together gives the owners reason to write that the emotions they experience behind the wheel, the pleasure they get from driving, more than pay for all the costs and compensate for all the shortcomings. And many reviews end with simple advice: if you find one alive, take it, you won't regret it.